our definitions of the ability to be assessed. No? So your job as a teacher is that you can, of course, use the book. You can take the book as a reference and take the ideas. A veces los libros vienen tan elaborados que a veces tiene ya la prueba ahí mismo. You have the test, you have variations, you have the objectives, etc. And so your job is to be very specific in relating these tasks, to particular points that are part of the content. So, for example, you take, for example, in level 1, se me ocurre, you have the office, one of the, and so as one of the aspects in the content, you have the routine that someone has in an office, right? And so you might want to take an activity, a new activity that you create for assessment, in which you refer to this specific aspect of the routine in an office. What a secretary usually does in an office. And so the idea is that then when people want clarifications or explanations, for example, the stakeholders will be able to understand your definitions, of this ability that you assessed to your students. And so, and that way, the more likely that these stakeholders will be convinced by our claims about meaningfulness. So obviously, if you want to be in good terms with parents want to make sure that the book that they bought, that is which is very expensive, is being used in all aspects, in the classroom, and also for tests, for evaluations, for assessment. And if the quiz is a reflection of what they see in class, it's much better. So parents are aware that the book is a good investment. Porque también seamos honestos, there are teachers that say, no, well, the book is, it has this material, but the material is outdated. I'm going to do my own material and I'm going to bring my own test. Okay, but this assessment is not related in any way to parts of the course content. And so it's going to cause conflict. Students say, no, I mean, we study the book, but they give us a quiz that is from internet. Right. Great. And then what about areas of language ability needed in context outside the classroom course? What can you say about this? Areas of language ability needed in context outside the language course. Do we have anybody, a volunteer who would like to try and explain in simple words what the author says here in this passage?
Which one, Prof? Which one?
Areas of language ability needed in contexts outside the classroom course.
Areas of language ability needed in context outside the language course.
It's the next item after. Yes.
Yeah. I think it is referred to the productive skills, mostly, speaking, writing, and it's based on developing the ability of communication outside the context of the classroom. So in this case, what the teachers and the other stakeholders want to develop in the students is the capacity of communicating their ideas and in outside the classroom.
Exactly,
So
different.
it is to make a real to provide a real exposition to the world, you know.
World. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Okay, good. The author, yeah, indeed, it talks about the context outside the classroom course. Well, he explains that well, typically, well, we have this. We work in the classrooms, and so usually we promote activities, for students to use language within the classroom. And of course, the language within the classroom is simpler. Yeah, that's what we typically do. But many times, students have to learn to use English in different contexts. For example, typically these students have family in the U.S. and they travel to these countries, and so they need English. Also, for example, for travel, some students may be interested in getting a job, in sexto curso, for example, and they are going to travel to the U.S. So they need English that can be used in the workplace. Others, for example, that work, if you ever work in an institute and you have students of working in, I don't know, in communications, in computers, so they need to receive language. They need to be able to use language in this context, in the context of talking about machines and computing and computers and everything. So those are eso es lo que se conoce como target language use domains, ¿no? So the target language use domains are the different contexts where students have to use the language.
Professor.
Yes.
So, for example, in this case, referring to areas of language ability needed in context, so we should establish some objectives that must be focused on the necessity of those students. For example, if they want to travel and study I don't know, maybe science, so those students must be able to write in English, to speak,
Yes.
to performance those things in a good way in order to achieve what they want. Yeah.
Yes. Very good. Very good. Very good comment and contribution for what I was explaining. Very good. So what the author points out here is that you need to think about these domains, because it's not always true that we're going to work only in primary or secondary. Maybe you get a job in an institute, maybe in preuniversitario. Okay, so for example, a good recommendation here is that, for example, if you're working in a school where they have this kind of no sé cómo le llaman, cuando tienen este curriculum cruzado, creo que le llaman, when for example, all areas are working on a particular aspect, for example, for example, you're working in English, right? But you have the Spanish teacher. So the Spanish teacher has a program, and your program in English is similar, of course, with limitations in English, of course. But these institutions, for example, usually want students to work at the same time on a specific line of instruction. And so what the author suggests here is that if you're working in this environment, the content of the language class will be integrated with the content of the other subjects, no? And so that's another consideration that we need to make. Another example that the author mentions is, for example, that many times schools want to prepare students for university, especially in quinto curso, sexto curso, and for example in the IB programs, no? And so in this case, the teacher needs to have the ability to integrate, no? the content of the book, digámoslo así, of the course book, with the academic, with more academic content, no? For example, in preparation for exams, or in preparing students for an interview, or in English, etc. No? And so in this case, it says the language teacher and the academic content teacher may want to collaborate to develop classroom-based assessments that reflect the integrated content of the language class. No? So in other words, it's always better if you work hand in hand with other teachers. No, if the institution has a particular objective, a particular goal, no, then you should find ways to integrate the contents of English with the more academic contents, or with the more specific contents. No, si es para trabajo, maybe more specific about English for the workplace, for example. And so you have to take into consideration this, no? That students may be learning the language for other courses, for travel, for work, etc. No? And so in this case, the content of the language course is likely to be based in part on the kind of language that our students will need in their university studies. Another example is, for example, students may be, the English class may be aimed at preparing students for a professional career. In this case, the content of the language course may focus on language for a specific purpose instruction, so that the content of the language classroom can be used as a basis for developing classroom-based assessments. Okay, so we have, as the author says, a vast majority of situations in which students may need to use the language outside the class. Okay, and so what he says is that we should use the content of the language class itself as the source of our ability definitions. Entonces ahí la habilidad nuestra de explicar, for example, well, we have this course book, but because the students have these particular needs, no, for this particular contexts, and so in my specification of the definition, I need to be skillful, no, in using the language and to explain the task, no, to explain the assessment. Right, pero hay que considerar los varios escenarios, ¿no? And the different needs that the students or the domains, or the target language use domains that where they are going to be involved. Right. Okay. So let's see, how much time do we have? We have a few minutes, yeah. So what about the next part? That says that defining the areas of language ability to be assessed. Meaningfulness. So what do you understand by meaningfulness? It's right here on the screen now. Okay, would anybody please explain what meaningfulness is? And maybe give an example related to your assessments, the assessments that you have prepared. Please, somebody, anybody?
So meaningfulness is refer for me. It is referred to the practicality and the how useful content is to be learned. So, yes. For example, anything that has to do with vocabulary, grammar, and for example, it could be to be more practical. Listening skills. Listening skills is something that is not usually addressed, but it plays an important role in learning in developing the other skills, because through listening you can understand new words, notice new structures, and so on. So, for example, when I was watching the practica, when I was in Práctica Docente in fourth semester, I was only watching what the teacher did in the class. And what I see he did was that he played a movie. In one day of the week, he played a movie in English. And it was really interesting to see that students were paying more attention, and they took more words from the movie than maybe a listening activity, a standard listening activity. So for me, watching that movie was more meaningful for them than participating in the standard activities.
In the standard instruction. Yeah, great. Yeah, so I understand that you have done a good definition of meaningfulness in that language, the language that we teach and the activities that we propose should be meaningful, right? So it may be more related in the how can I say, in the choice of activities that you propose for the students. Yeah, and that is one thing, and it's true. No, we as teachers should promote activities that are meaningful and also that the students find meaningful. Now, in the book, in this passage of the book, as you can see on the screen now, it's in green. It's in blue. The definition of meaningfulness. And I'm sure that if you click there, maybe you have a more complete definition. So meaningfulness, when we talk about interpretations, is the degree, no, como dice ahí, is the degree to which the intended interpretation first provides stakeholders with information about the ability that is going to be assessed, and second, no, it conveys this information in terms that they can understand and relate to. So in other words, meaningfulness se refiere a la to how you explain, no, how you explain to, for example, other stakeholders, for example, parents, students, teachers, right? About the intended interpretations, and second, that you do this in terms or in words that all the stakeholders can understand and relate to. Right. So it has a different, una diferente acepción here for meaningfulness. No? If you want to guarantee meaningfulness in your interpretations, okay, if we can go to the next slide, this next page, please, Abby. We need to do the following. One, it says define the areas of language ability we want to assess and describe the source of our ability definition. So, content of a language course. I don't know. Let me see. Defining, assessing, developing. Where is that? Abby, can you? Before activity 6.1, I think it's one page before.
I think
Yeah.
missing or this one.
Areas of a language needed in the classroom course. The next one, no? If you can go here, defining. Yeah, maybe I was lost, but now I'm. No, one page before that.
I don't.
Because that
Yeah.
that is in my book. You don't have that, but maybe something happened. Well, we're finishing, so I'm going to try and explain. Well, in my maybe what happened is that when you, because you took photos, maybe you forgot this page, but I'm sure that it's in the link in the book. So so continuing with meaningfulness, you can do the following. No? One, define the areas of language ability you want to assess and describe the source of our ability definition. So you take, easy, no? You take the book, right? Que sería más fácil. You take the book, because that's the source of your ability definition, and then you define what areas you want to assess, no? Right. And second, no, but you have to be careful. You have to use terms that you as a teacher and other teachers understand, and then simpler language when you want to explain this to students and parents and other stakeholders. When the stakeholder is the teacher, is another teacher, you can put it in the same language that the course book has, ¿no? A veces estos indicadores están en el mismo libro, entonces uso el mismo lenguaje because we are teachers, right? But when you want to explain to the parents, you might want to adapt the language, no? So that's recommendation B, no? Use terms that other stakeholders, such as parents and guardians, will understand. Right. So if you're talking, for example, to other teachers and the coordinator, you can use this technical language, no? With these sophisticated words about assessment, about collecting a sample. Well, you can use all these words. For your students, you will most likely use the terminology that is maybe in the textbook, or with the words that you usually use in class. For other audiences, for example, parents, guardians, etc., however, you have to use terms that they can understand, more common terms. For example, for the parents and guardians, you can say, the student presents an ability to read and comprehend paragraphs of written texts. Ability to write a well-organized essay. So it's something very simple like this. Student can write a well-organized essay. That's language that everybody can understand. Okay, of course, it says here, the author says that there's no one single correct form to define, one correct way to define the ability to be assessed. So, well, this depends on your ability, on your ability as a teacher, no, maybe with the expertise, no, it comes natural, no, to you. And so, okay, well, here the author gives example, no, about pronunciation, about writing, etc. Okay. Right. Okay. So practically with this, which is on page 61, we have finished. Well, not entirely, because there are still a few pages to read here. But I mean, we've covered the basics, no, of chapter 6. So for homework, you have to read page 65. How should we assess, no, assessment tasks? No? Then you have to read generalizability and interpretations. No, those are two important concepts. No, generalizability and interpretation. TLU domains and TLU tasks. Impartiality, which is another important concept. Well, of course, impartiality has to do with you not having any biases, no, que uno no tenga ninguna discriminación or bias or about a particular group of students or something, no? So of course we have to be impartial, no? Even more when we are doing when we're preparing an assessment, no? Yeah. And then we have some examples, no? We have an example on page 68, no, on how we relate claims, how we relate claims 3 to claim 1 and 2, ¿no? O sea, cómo se integra todo, ¿no? Interpretations with decisions and consequences. And then you have an example on page 69. I think reading the example is going to be very, very clarifying about, and then you have the intended interpretation. I'm not sure, but I think the example is the same that we used in claim 1 and claim 2. So you're going to find it easy to relate this example to the previous one. Yeah, and then for homework, esto sí es homework, you're going to do activity 6.1. 6.1 and 6.2 on page 70. That's for homework. Activity 6.1 and 6.2. In 6.1, you have the example of, you have the setting. Okay. But in 62, you have to explain the setting. You have to think about an assessment that you have used recently. Right. And finish this study by reading the backing, no? Providing backing for claim 3, which is also very, very useful. Okay, and so with that, we have finished this chapter 6. So on Thursday, we have the presentations, okay? Please send me the names of each member of the groups, the 5 groups that we need, maybe by tomorrow.